Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Barcelona Job. We have today an interesting meetup with Manuel Pace. Who we are? We are a bunch of enthusiasts and techies related with Java and agile technology, but we are also a non-profit open group with almost 2,000 members. We are located legally in Barcelona since 2012. And we are always open to discuss new technologies, services, methodologies, anything that you would like to know about. We are curious about it. What do we do? Well, we normally meet monthly, once or two times per month to discuss frameworks, architectures, and many other things. We also evaluate and share ideas, products, and solutions. And we do all that to keep growing the developer community here in Barcelona and also in the rest of the country. And we do everything that is related with Java and the JVM and the development world. And we also do something with the cloud technologies and also DevOps. So if you want to follow us, we are all over the place. We have a page on LinkedIn. We are also on Twitter, on Flickr. We started posting on Instagram. And if you want to have recordings of previous session of the meetups or the conference on past editions, you can also reach them on YouTube. And if you want to know about our previous or any future events, you can reach them on the YouTube page. Some events we have had in the past were related to these topics. As you can see, there are many technologies and many tools that we are always discussing about. And in the past, we have organized an event in Barcelona. It's the JVCN Conf with almost 800 attendees and with international speakers. And we are going to share a few pictures of the conference so you can see how amazing it is to attend. We are very proud to organize it and make it available for the community. From developers to developers is something that we would like for ourselves. And all of that is possible with the hard work of our volunteers and organizers. In the past, we have had some meetups about also Java and Quarkus and the present and the future of Java and releasing our previous edition. We were not able to perform it presentially because of the pandemics, but we were able to have it digitally. And we have some great numbers, like 700 attendees. And so our next events for this month, we will have two physical events here in Barcelona. The first one is on March 22nd at the eDreams offices. We will have some storytelling from the engineering department, talking about their journey to Kubernetes and Kafka and the cloud. And we will also have at the end of the month a talk about open web application security. And we are encouraged to encourage you to attend because we are now resuming these physical meetups, and we are hoping that you can also come be with us. Our next event is the JVCN Conf. It's in this summer in Barcelona, July 18 and to 20. We will have 3 days full of talks with almost 74 speakers, and we will have workshops as well in a big area. We will be at the convention center of Barcelona, the same one that we did the conference in the 2019 edition, and we expect to have like 800 speakers, attendees, sorry. And the call for paper is still open until April 30. And also the tickets are selling very well. And so I encourage you to hurry up and get them before we raise the price. And finally, I have to thanks to our sponsor for making this possible is Jakarta EE, which is bringing the platform to us for enjoying this event today. And also, if you want to join us or you want to contribute to our community, if you have any idea or any question or any suggestion that can make the community grow or that we would like to take a look, we are always open. You can send us an email to info@barcelonajoc, or you can contact us via Slack on the channels, and we'll be happy to discuss it. For today's talk, we have Manuel Pais. He's an independent IT and organizational consultant and trainer. He's the co-author of Team Topologies, and he's going to talk with us about the frozen DevOps and why are so many organizations stuck in the middle of the DevOps revolution. So I give you the talk, Manuel.
Thank you, Anju, and thank you for inviting me for this meetup. I'm going to share my screen. So
yes,
I won't be talking about any particular technology today or tools, but we're going to talk about DevOps and what are some of the, we could call them, I guess, shortcomings that organizations face that have invested maybe quite a lot in the DevOps approach, and to some extent they don't see the results that they expected. So we're going to talk about frozen DevOps in the sense of these organizations that kind of, they have achieved some benefits, some improvements, but they're sort of frozen in the way, somewhere in the middle. So as Anil mentioned, I'm co-author of the book Team Topologies with Matthew Skelton. If you want kind of a quick definition of the book, I like this one because it fits my mental model of what the book is about. It's innovative tools and concepts and sort of building blocks for thinking about your digital operating model. So obviously talking about what kind of teams should we have in place, what is the relationship between these teams, how should they interact, and all these kind of dynamic aspects. The nice thing that we've realized from the book since it came out is that different people with different roles in the organization actually take benefit or find benefits in Team Topologies because there are many different entry points. You can be looking at it from a single team perspective and looking at things like we talk about, like the team API and tracking your dependencies on other teams and things like this, and understanding kind of what type of team are we and what's the gap to actually become more of that type of team. But you can also obviously look at it from a more high-level perspective, from kind of, if you like, CTO perspective, trying to understand how do I figure out what ecosystem of teams is going to actually help me. So it's not just each individual team having a clear mission, clear purpose, and removing obstacles for those teams, but actually what kind of support do they need? What other types of teams do we need to have in place? Anyway, we'll come back to some of the ideas in Team Topologies as they relate to the topic of the talk. And so Frozen DevOps is not about the movie Frozen, just to make that clear, even though probably for my kids, they would find that interesting, but it's actually strongly based on the results of the State of DevOps report that came out last year, the one from Puppet. You might have, if you're familiar, if you follow DevOps kind of news, a few years ago there was sort of split, and now we have the Google DevOps report and Puppet DevOps report. Anyway, so they actually asked us to help them figure out which kind of questions would be useful to try to understand, as hundreds or thousands of organizations answer the survey, to have a feeling of how does having a clear setup of our teams, clear mission, clear interactions, how does that help or not kind of improve the DevOps performance? One of the things that they've been seeing actually over the years, not just this year, is that we now have a lot of organizations that are in this kind of mid DevOps evolution, if you like, or performance, where a lot of organizations obviously have taken some of the practices, approaches that are related to DevOps and cloud infrastructure as code, all these useful practices, and all the automation, of course. And so we have today, at least based on the results of the report, a significantly small number of organizations that haven't even tried to adopt some of these practices, right? So if you go into a new company, if you change jobs, you probably would be very surprised if they don't do infrastructure as code, if they don't do deployment automation, these kind of things, right? Kind of becomes the sort of standard. Obviously, those companies still exist, but very small percentage. And then if you look at the other end, there's also a small percentage of organizations that we can qualify as high performing around DevOps. So, and that hasn't changed very much over the years, even though the practices that we have more, we have a lot better tooling than we had even 4 years ago, and much more than if we compared 5 or 10 years ago. And so why is this kind of frozen middle, as we've called them? And what we're talking about in terms of low, mid, high is actually looking at specific metrics. So if you're familiar with the Accelerate book by Dr. Nicole Forsgren and Jez Humble and Gene Kim, then they talk about 4 key metrics correlated to high-performing teams. And so when you look at this graph here, it means a lot of organizations, even though they have the tools, even though they have the automation, they're still kind of in this middle, right? Where lead time for changes is usually up to a week. Mean time to restore service is up to a day. And when you compare that to the high performance that it takes less than an hour for both of those things, meaning we could actually have a new request from the business or the customer. And obviously, if it's small enough, we are able to make that change and get it into production within an hour. That's pretty impressive, right? And so that's why this matters. That's why the organizations that are sort of stuck in the middle are actually would benefit from looking at what exactly is stopping us now that we have all this technology, we have all this automation. So the report provides evidence, as I say, that the recommendations in Team Topologies help to orient the organization towards becoming more highly evolved. So we're going to see what are some of these recommendations or some of the approaches we talk about that are have been found to correlate with highly evolved and performing organizations. So the question is this: why are so many organizations frozen in this DevOps middle? And we're going to look at a number of different aspects and sort of maybe I could say it's a myth or it's a naive approach that organizations have that maybe is not allowing them to improve more. So one of the things I was saying that we see is organizations say, but we have cloud, we have CI/CD, we have SRE, we have observability, and that's obviously all helpful. And good engineering practices, good technology and approaches are necessary, but how are these being provided to the teams? How are these being made available inside the organization? Have we thought about that? Have we thought about, is this easy to consume by the teams that are actually trying to build services or products that the organization is trying to sell or to provide to customers? And so the way that these things are provided and whose responsibility is it to take care of these things actually can influence a lot the benefits we get from their usage. Because if the usage is difficult, if we have a lot of obstacles or complications to actually benefit and make use of these approaches, then we're not really getting the value that we could be having. And so the point here is organizations should not expect to become highly evolved just because these cloud and automation and other things, they are held back by organizational structure and dynamics. So one of the key things we talk about is removing blocking dependencies from teams, right? So when we talk about blocking dependencies, what you see here on top, where let's say we have a team working on some service, working on some features, and they're trying to deliver that value to the customer. If we have a sort of gate where, okay, if we need to change the cloud infrastructure, for example, there's a team that has to approve it, or there's a team that has to make the change for you, that would be a blocking dependency, right? We have to stop the work we're doing and wait for this other team. The same thing for deployment, for example. These are just examples. For a deployment, if we have to wait for some approval, if we have to wait for some team to do it for us or to review what we're doing, then we're blocking the original team. So that's going to prevent us from achieving shorter lead times, faster deployment frequency, etc. And so these are some of the key problems that many organizations still have. They haven't really dealt with, even though they have cloud, they have SRE practices and all those good things. So we should be looking at how do we move from this kind of blocking dependencies to non-blocking dependencies, where we still need help. If we're thinking from a software delivery team's perspective, we still need help with easy ways to provision infrastructure and easy ways to deploy our application, easy ways to monitor our application, etc. And so to some extent, there's still a dependency on some other team that's providing us that kind of support, but we want to make it a self-service dependency, meaning probably some kind of platform that provides services that can be consumed by the software delivery teams. And so we might have a monitoring service, we might have a deployment service that is a good fit for what our teams need. It's not just something generic that we make available to teams, but actually we think about how to make it easy for our software delivery teams, or streamline teams as we call them in Team Topologies, to do those things, to keep the responsibility, to keep the ownership of deploying, provisioning, monitoring, etc., but in a way that doesn't block them, that is not waiting for another team to do something. This is a diagram from the book, and so I won't go into all details, but very briefly, we talk about 4 types of teams. The stream-aligned team would be, if you like, in DevOps terms, a kind of build and run team, perhaps with even more kind of responsibilities around on the kind of the business side, and understanding more of the customer needs, being able to make more decisions around what to build inside the team. But if to simplify, you can think of those as build and run teams. We have platform teams that, in our perspective, we're talking about platform as an internal product that's being provided to the other teams in this sort of non-blocking way, right? So teams self-serve and self-use the platform, the internal platform being provided by these sort of platform teams. And when we talk about enabling teams as usually experts in some domain that are helping the streamline teams or the build and run teams gain some knowledge that they might have a gap. Maybe they don't have a lot of skills in test automation, or they don't have skills around database development, whatever or security, whatever they need help to kind of upskill and be able to keep that ownership of their own service. And complicated subsystems are kind of an exception, but there are sometimes some very complicated, maybe some algorithm or something like a face recognition subsystem that you actually need a team dedicated to be able to build and evolve that kind of subsystem. But they're sort of an exception. We try to avoid them. So that was a 2-minute explanation of one of the key ideas in team topologies. But what we're saying is we're bringing in this concern with the way teams are set up, how they interact, how they are related to each other, how do we avoid blocking dependencies. And so Andrew Clay Schaefer, who was one of the initial, let's say, proponents of DevOps, he's now at Red Hat Digital Transformation Office. And he said DevOps was always as much about organizational structure and incentives as any of the technical details. So DevOps was actually sort of, or was meant by the proponents of DevOps, like Patrick Debois and other people who were involved, as an umbrella to discuss all these kind of issues that are blocking teams, that are slowing down teams, where there is lack of collaboration, where there should be collaboration, and all these kind of things. And so what the report, going back to the report from last year, what they found is that organizations where teams have strong identities, so strong, clear mission, that are well understood by other teams with clearly defined responsibilities are far more likely to be higher performing. So there is a correlation between clarity of team purpose, clarity of interactions with other teams into the results that we're having. And so one of the questions was, do teams adjacent, so closely related to my team, have a clear understanding of their responsibilities as they relate to my team? And high-performing organizations have more positive answers to this question than mid and definitely compared to low. So this kind of clarity of responsibilities, clarity of interactions, actually, we can see that is more prevalent in high-performing organizations. So the kind of conclusion here in this topic is that high-evolved organizations have teams with a clear mission and purpose that is understood by other teams. So that is one of the key aspects that the report brought about. Obviously, from our perspective as Team Topologies authors, that was something we already had seen in different customers, but it's nice to have kind of validation with a broader number of organizations. Another common, let's say, or another kind of naive approach is to expect, well, if all the teams are open to collaborate with all other teams, then that's going to be a good thing, right? And to some extent, this has been promoted within the DevOps kind of movement. But we have to understand there are different. We have to understand two things. First of all, collaboration is actually expensive because you have two teams working together, and so the context is bigger. They won't be able to work at the same pace on their own backlogs. So there's a cost. And the second thing is there are different stages. So if we were back in 2009, 2010, where most organizations had a development group separate from the operations group, and possibly separate from security group, and all these separate groups, and there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of tickets going back and forth, and in some cases a lot of blaming going back and forth, then definitely at that stage we needed way more collaboration. But now, if we have at least build and run teams, it's actually expensive. Collaboration is expensive to expect teams to be able to do their work, to have to collaborate with many other teams. So it's not scalable or repeatable. And so the more we have sort of handovers and the need to collaborate to get stuff done and into the customer's hands, then the slower we're going to be, the longer our lead times are going to be, and all those other metrics are probably going to be negatively affected. And also, when we look at the feedback, then the more teams we have involved in the software delivery lifecycle, and the kind of runtime as well, then the longer the feedback loop is going to be, and the harder it's going to be to have high quality information and data back to the original team that is supposedly responsible for a given service, right? So we want to avoid all these transitions, all these handovers of work. So I talked about the types of teams, and the other kind of fundamental idea in team topologies are the interaction modes between teams. So collaboration, we actually define it not just kind of open-ended, we're working with another team, but it should be with a very clear purpose for expected duration. So we're going to collaborate with this team maybe for 2 weeks. We need to define a new API, or we need to figure out how we're going to solve some problem that is common to the two teams, whatever is the purpose, but we have a clear idea what is this collaboration for, how long we expect it to last, so that we're not in this kind of open-ended where every other week or every other month we have to collaborate with another team. If that's the case, we should be looking at ways where we can actually decouple these teams more. There's some coupling there that we should be addressing. X as a service is effectively bringing the ideas and the good patterns around things like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, into our own organization, especially for the platform that we have internally, to have, as much as possible, provide services in this X as a service way, where we have a good experience for the users, we have the right level of documentation, we have the right quality of service around availability, reliability, all these other things, performance. And so we're focusing on providing it's an internal service, but we have the same focus as if this was an external third-party company providing infrastructure as a service, for example. And facilitating is typical for enabling teams, where one team has expertise in some domain, they're helping another team learn. And again, we should set up clear purpose for this interaction. How long is it going to take? What are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to teach this team how to get started with test automation? Have the first automated test running, for example, would be a good kind of specific enough purpose that we know when the interaction is over. And so the report also said that if you simply adopt the team types, you're missing one of the key takeaways, which is paying attention, being deliberate about team setup and their desired interactions. So we use these interactions to kind of guide what we need to do with other teams, right? So it's not so open-ended and unclear as it used to be in the past, where sometimes we don't even know which other teams do we need to work with, or when will they be available, for how long, when do we know if we need to collaborate more or not. So it's much more well-defined, these interactions, and it helps teams, and it helps also people like product managers, for example, to understand which interactions are going to need to happen and when. And then we use the output of the interactions to also understand what other interactions maybe we should have. So high evolved organizations welcome purposeful interactions with clear goals and duration. Right? So that's the difference to the organizations that just assume that we just need to collaborate more, right? So that's not enough. Some organizations actually believe and try to have fully autonomous build and run teams, but as I said before, it's not that we never. It's a very kind of idealistic thought that we have teams with no dependencies on other teams, if that's how we define fully autonomous. In an ideal world, then sure, you would have all super engineers that know everything about everything in the life cycle, but that's not very realistic, especially if we have teams of a limited size, usually around 7, 8, 9 people, if we want to keep the team kind of well gelled and with high trust inside the team. And so there's a limit to how much these build and run teams can actually take on as their own responsibility. And so we talk about this in the sense of cognitive load. The cognitive load for the team, if it's left unbounded, meaning we're just asking the team to do all these things by themselves, their metrics and performance metrics will be negatively affected, preventing teams from evolving to higher levels. And so what actually has happened sometimes in organizations is that we did have build and run teams. They were actually at some point high performing, but because we didn't take care of the cognitive load on these teams, we were just asking them to do more and more, to take on more responsibility. At some point, they sort of reverted to mid-performing kind of teams because it's just too much for a single team if we don't think about what other teams are needed. So especially platform teams and services, maybe they need help from some enabling teams on some domains that they don't have the necessary knowledge. And so if we leave a team to their own devices and we just tell them, now we're going to be fully autonomous, just make all the decisions by yourself, we're actually putting them in a dangerous position where they have so much to worry about that the cognitive load just goes through the roof. As Jeff Susna, who wrote the book Designing Delivery, said, how do organizations structure themselves for DevOps if we want to move away from silos, but we can't just put everyone on a single silo-less team? Then we would have teams of 20 people, 30 people if we wanted to do that. And so that's where the idea of the platform is so important. A valuable platform reduces cognitive load on the stream-aligned teams. So we're kind of also shifting the mission and the approach that traditionally has been for platforms as some sort of shared services layer. And we're actually, maybe we need less services, but we need the right services to address the cognitive load of the stream-aligned teams. We need the services that simplify the life of the what we call stream-aligned teams, of the software delivery teams, if you like. So those teams are still responsible, so they would still be doing deployments, provisioning, monitoring, etc. But now we have high quality services in the platform that have been discovered and have been evolved together with the stream-aligned teams by understanding their needs, understanding what are the problems they have, so that they actually can use them, and that will make their lives easier. So very briefly, just to give you a bit more insight on cognitive load, that's the total amount of mental effort being used in working memory. So this was defined by John Sweller, who is a psychologist. And so he was talking at an individual level, but we can see how this applies at the team level as well, since the team is a group of individuals, right? Maybe we cannot measure precisely what is the cognitive load number, but we know there is a limit. And more importantly, there are actually different types of cognitive load. So there's intrinsic cognitive load, which has to do with kind of the skills that you need for your job in your team. So you can think, or I like to make the analogy to learning to drive a car, right? In the beginning, and even in the first months or even years, when you're driving, you have all this cognitive load because I'm trying to remember, okay, I need to change the gear now, or I need to look at the mirror, I need to check if someone's passing me before I turn right or left, actually. Anyway, so there's all these things that are going through your mind because you don't have the kind of the enough experience, enough skills to do that in a more automated manner, right? So we're the same with software delivery teams. If we work with some technologies and some tooling and we don't have enough experience, that's going to be taking up some of our cognitive, of our mental effort. And to some extent, that's some of that cannot be removed or minimized, but some things can be improved if we have good kind of some mentoring, or we have useful training, and we have maybe with pair programming, we can help people gain more of this intrinsic skills that they need. The second type of cognitive load is extraneous. So this has to do with kind of the mechanics and the environment of our work. So if we need to often remember how do I deploy my application, maybe there are a lot of steps involved. If I need to know, a lot of different configuration files, and I need to understand all these different parameters to configure my service, for example, that's also some kind of extraneous cognitive load. It's not directly related to the problem I'm trying to solve for the customer or the organization, but are things that we need to do. And so that's extraneous cognitive load taking up our mental capacity. And so once we understand this and we know that germane cognitive load is everything then focused on the business problem, focusing on the customers and what are we actually trying to solve and how are you doing it, what kind of solution are we trying to implement, then the sort of conclusion from understanding these different types of cognitive load is that we want to minimize the intrinsic extraneous cognitive load so teams focus more on the germane side. And then what's interesting is that often what's extraneous cognitive load for streamlined teams, for example, if we have to worry about which kind of monitoring tools we're using, how do we install the tools, how do we maintain them, all kinds of tasks that are really shouldn't be the focus of a team that is delivering some service to customers. We should be focusing on the customers, not on all these technical aspects. But if we have, for example, a monitoring service in the platform, that is actually their germane cognitive load, because the users of the monitoring service are the customers for the platform team. So we're better managing the cognitive load by reducing extraneous and having more teams focus on germane cognitive load. Sorry. So we might have, given platform, different services, and we have teams inside the platform aligned to these different services, right? So we know if we're in this infrastructure provisioning service team in the platform, our customers are our internal teams using this service. And so when we're worried about scaling infrastructure, we're worried about infrastructure as code, etc., those are all germane for this team. But maybe they're not germane for a software delivery team, and they should be able to kind of abstract to some extent those details. So that we have this kind of approach where we have streamlined teams consuming platform services that help reduce their cognitive load. And so what the report found effectively that highly evolved firms use a combination of streamlined teams and platform teams as an effective way or most effective way to manage cognitive load at scale because of this situation where we're reducing extraneous cognitive load in many teams by sort of pushing that into platform, where for the platform team is actually germane cognitive load. Obviously, the way that this is done is critical. If we're just creating a platform service in isolation, we're not actually talking to the software delivery teams, then we're probably not going to have a good idea of what they actually need. So the way we do this is obviously critical as well. But we have in highly evolved organizations, we have an ecosystem of loosely coupled teams that promotes fast flow and continuous learning. And finally, another aspect that some of these organizations that are sort of frozen in this DevOps middle, they have a platform team that they call a platform team that is trying to solve common problems for other teams. That is quite common and makes sense. But the way in which these platform teams are working is can make a big difference. And so the report found the existence of a platform team just by itself does not necessarily inherently unlock higher evolution DevOps. And that's where we need to have some agreement of what do we mean by platform then. We already had some hints in the earlier about non-blocking platform. And so I like the definition from Evan Butcher, where he's talking about the digital platform as a foundation of self-service APIs, tools, and services. So that is key to not block teams. So we don't have a ticket-based kind of a platform approach where we still need to ask and make requests to the platform team to do things for us. That's not what we're talking about, and that's not what highly evolved organizations do. They focus on self-service, but then it's also about knowledge and support, so that effectively there are teams in this platform that are worried about onboarding, are worried about how do we make it easier for teams to understand what is this platform about and what it provides. And arrange as a compelling internal product. That means as much as possible, we don't want to impose the platform on teams. We want them to adopt the platform because they feel it's helpful. And this sets the right or better incentives, in my opinion, for the platform teams to focus on the customers and not just on the technical side or what can we build. And, it would be making decisions just inside the platform of what's going to be needed, because they're just going to, if other teams are going to have to use the service from the platform, then we don't have the good incentive to treat the platform as a product, understand the customers of the platform. So successful platform teams treat their platform as a product. They strive to create a compelling value proposition for the application team. So that was another conclusion from the report. So if some of you are asking what is platform as a product, very quickly is, first of all, platform as a product is optional to use. We're not forcing teams to use a platform. Yes, there might be a small set of kind of very core services around things like access control or identity management where we can't really provide options or for teams, but as much as possible, we should allow teams to choose if they want to use the platform or if they want to do it in a different way. As long as they have the valid kind of business case or reason to do that they can justify why we need to use a different approach to monitoring or CI/CD or whatever it is that the platform already provides. And people like Courtney Kistler, who has been CTO at Starbucks, at Nike, and other companies, she said, anytime these standards, practices, process frameworks, or architectures become a mandate, I've seen little to no adoption. So that speaks to this issue of building things and imposing things without actually caring about adoption. A platform as a product is also carefully designed, curated for its customers. Again, focus on the user and user needs. It takes advantage of technology changes, right? Ideally, if we're providing platform services that have the right level of abstraction for our internal teams, then we might be able or have an easier way to evolve the technology, the underlying technology, without actually impacting the teams using that service, or not as much. And finally, platform product needs necessarily to use modern product management and follow the adoption lifecycle in particular. Understand different teams, especially the largest organization, different teams will have different experience, different knowledge, different background. So they're not all going to jump to use your platform service immediately. You need to understand, who are going to be maybe early adopters versus other teams that are going to be more lagging behind. And so we try to evolve the service based on the kind of friction we see to adoption. But again, that's not going to be possible if we don't take this platform as a product approach. And the result tends to be happier users of the platform, our engineering teams, less technology bloat, where we've built a lot of stuff, this monster platform, because we could and because we thought was going to be useful, but we never actually took the time to validate with our internal teams if it was really useful. And hopefully the platform has a better chance to evolve and to take on newer technology, newer practices as time goes by. And so highly evolved platform teams understand their internal customers and offer a curated set of technologies for infrastructure and development capabilities. This was another conclusion from the report. And one of the questions was about use of internal platforms and the level of DevOps evolution. And so highly evolved organizations tend to use internal platforms in this platform as a product approach much more than mid and low performing organizations. So in low performing organizations, you might expect to not even have much of a platform, or you have platforms where it's very much based on requests, on tickets, on not providing self-service capabilities, just a team that's replying to requests. Create this infrastructure for me, or open this port for me, and this sort of approach. And so highly evolved organizations treat the platform as a product, as a curated experience for the users. I'm almost done. And so one of the key conclusions that success at scale for highly evolved organizations requires optimizing not for the individual, not for the team, but kind of the wider organization or the team of teams, as we saw. Understanding different types of teams that we need, how they relate to each other. And highly evolved organizations have discovered patterns that work well for a fast flow of change. So the things we've been talking in this presentation: more decoupling of teams, self-service approach, bringing knowledge to the teams in a kind of more targeted way with enabling teams. All of these patterns help organizations that want to become high performing with a faster flow of change and faster feedback as well. So just some resources. If on our main website, teamtopologies.com, there are a lot of free resources, examples from companies that have adopted some of the patterns. We also have an online academy. So this is for video-based training, for people who want to know more. In particular, related to what we talked today, there's a platform as a product 2.5-hour course. So it's self-paced, and you just take the video lessons and with some exercises. And there's also a bundle if people are interested with the other course, which is kind of a distilled version of the Team Topologies book, where we go through the key concepts and the types of teams, etc. And that's it. So that's the main website, teamtopologies.com, if you want to know more. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Unfortunately, I do have to leave rather soon, but I'm happy to answer some questions before I have to go.
Okay, many thanks for your time, Manuel.
Thank you.
It's very interesting that the DevOps report has included your team topologies concept within the report for highly performing teams. And we have a question here from Sergio. Would you like to do the question on screen, Sergio? Let me invite him. But the question is any recommendation about how to organize adoption for a platform team?
So is the question what recommendation to help a platform team look at adoption?
Yes, how to organize the adoption of a platform team? Yes.
Yeah. So essentially, you can look at the.
Here we have it. Here we have it. Hello, Sergio.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, we are in a moment that we are starting this concept of platform, and I was wondering that at some point we are starting together with the teams and a short phase of collaboration. Then we are delivering, and we expect other teams also to come and we expect to create something that is compelling. Okay, and we will need to help them to adopt and evolve our solution, getting feedback from the developers. No? And I don't know if there is some experience or you see some patterns about how to apply organizations that ensures that the adoption is done properly. You know, I don't know if something special to.
Yeah. So let me. I was just looking here for a useful visualization here. Just give me 1 second. But essentially, we're looking at the. Okay, I found. So this is from that platform as a product course. I'm still sharing, right?
No anymore.
Okay, so let me share just very briefly. So you're probably familiar with this product adoption lifecycle, right? Where we've for any kind of product or technology, this tends to be how the target audience, if you like, for that product, how they're split, right? So the exact numbers might vary, but you get the point that there's some early innovators. People jump on board very quickly. We want to try the latest things. Some early adopters, people who are okay with some initial problems. Some, maybe the service or the product is not super stable yet. Maybe there's still some bugs that are happening. So groups that have high tolerance to risk. And then when you start getting to the sort of majority of teams, early majority and late majority, that's where we need to pay even more attention to what are the frictions for these teams. Maybe they find the documentation to onboard this service is complicated to understand, or not enough. Maybe they maybe they just don't have the time to look at it, and so you need to reach out to them and maybe propose a 1 hour session or whatever that you can help them quickly understand, how is this going to help you. And so it might be a number of things that are preventing teams from adopting the service, the platform. And so we need to, if we have this adoption lifecycle in mind, it helps us kind of set the expectation for ourselves as a platform team. Where is this service? Obviously it starts with innovators, maybe some teams we collaborate with to understand how this service is gonna be helpful. And then as we go through the curve, we start to identify other problems that some teams might have. There's also a really interesting case study here, but they also have published articles called Hellofresh. I can try to paste the link in the chat. Their approach has been, I would say, in line with this idea. They really look to talk with different types of engineers and different teams to understand what are the problems that they have and how the service then maybe needs to be adapted to help them. Mm-hmm. So I hope that helps a little bit getting started.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks, Manuel. I have a question from myself. Who should be responsible of bringing the technology changes or technology adoption to the value stream? Let's say we want to use Kubernetes to deliver our solution. Should it be a responsibility for the platform team or maybe an enabling team, or should the value stream acquire this capability by themselves?
Yeah, that's a good example. And actually, there's a really good talk from someone at Airbnb, Melanie Cibula. So again, I can share briefly, and I can put the link in the chat. The reason why it's interesting, because they actually had this sort of problem where they introduced Kubernetes, but they had, I don't remember the numbers, but it was like 1,000 or thousands of engineers, developers, 1,000 engineers, they said. And so initially they were expecting development teams to just use directly the Kubernetes APIs and understand all the configuration, etc. And then teams started to report. Basically, this was adding a lot of complexity to their already complex work of their everyday. And so it was really, they realized quickly this is not a good approach. And so it's a good candidate to have some platform services. In this case, and this talk is really interesting, they did that essentially just with some simple command line tools that abstract some of the configuration boilerplate that Kubernetes requires for the deployments and other kind of things. So they focused on what do the development teams in their case, what do they really need to know that is directly related to their application, which configuration do they need to know about that, and let the other things sort of be taken care by this very simple command line tool that generates the actual full configuration file. So it's a good example, but obviously different organizations might have a different approach. If you do, you might have a small company, sort of a startup or scale up, where all the teams already have experience with Kubernetes, and maybe it doesn't even, it's not even worth to try to create some abstractions. So just let them use directly the APIs, and maybe have some wiki page that provides some guidance, right? Here are some useful default configurations, or here's some ways to improve the security of your Kubernetes configuration, things like that. But in general, especially at kind of a larger scale, you probably want to look at what kind of platform services would be useful for a technology like this.
Okay, do we have a room for one more question?
Sure. And there were also questions in the chat.
Yes, I invite Javi to ask the question directly.
Cool.
Well, actually, first of all, thanks for the nice presentation, Manuel and Anjul, for this event. Actually, I have two questions, and I don't know which one to ask. But regarding my current role, what would be your advice for architects and architecture teams regarding team topologies?
Yeah.
It's an anti-pattern,
in general,
right?
Yeah.
I read that this is an anti-pattern on the book, right?
Well, it depends how they're acting, right? So how they're helping other teams, and also there are obviously different levels of architecture we can talk about. And there's a good book from Gregor Hope, what is it called? The Architect Elevator, or something like that.
Yes, the Architect Elevator. Yes.
Architect Elevator. But to answer directly your question, in general, the architects would be a good candidate for an enabling team.
Okay. They
have the knowledge, and so we're never saying that we don't need this knowledge anymore, that we don't need architecture. We need it to have good design of our systems, and make sure we look at a good approach to decouple services and all these things. But rather than, if they're working in more of a silo way, where they're just creating guidance for teams, but they're not actually working together with the teams, that's maybe not as useful. So an enabling approach would allow this kind of architecture team to directly help the teams and identify which teams have more gaps and in their understanding of architecture, understanding of non-functional requirements and these kind of things, and help them by maybe facilitating over a couple of weeks, let's do some workshops, or let's look at some examples of how you could improve your database performance, or whatever it might be. And at the same time, keep their expertise, and keep learning and keep improving and finding better patterns, all that. So typically they would be a good candidate for enabling team. They might also be in a good position then to identify useful platform services, where we might say, where they might help the platform teams understand, well, look, if we had a service to monitor this kind of performance, or I don't know, just making up something, but they might identify what would be helpful to have in as a platform service.
Lovely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. What happened? Do we have room for another question? Or?
Okay, last one.
Okay. Engineering platform teams driven by business product managers, or product managers into engineering organizations? Okay.
And by the way, you might hear some background noise because my kids are home now, and I think Javi was talking to maybe his kid as well. So engineering platform teams driven by business product managers. My recommendation is for the platform maybe it's a platform group, maybe you have a group of teams, or even if you have only one team, we need to bring product management into this platform, right? It doesn't mean necessarily that you have a specific person. Usually at the early stages, probably you will need someone with experience, and we actually recommend customers don't put kind of junior or new product managers in the organization into the platform, because it's actually more complicated than to some extent than a regular between quotes product that's serving our end customers. So you actually need, in the beginning at least, very good product management skills in the platform, because a lot of things are new, and what we saw about the adoption lifecycle, for example, doing user research kind of things, it's all new, and prioritizing obviously the work when you start having possibly a lot of demand from different teams. All of that requires good product management approach. So that's I would recommend considering having an experienced product manager at least in the platform group, maybe not on each team, but at least at the group level.
Okay. Many thanks again for your time, Manuel, and also
thank you, and you and everyone for your participation.
Yes, we encourage you to read the Team Topologies book. It's a great book. Particularly, it changed my life when I read it.
That's a big compliment.
Along with the Accelerate, are one of the most important books for lean software and fast flow and DevOps. So I encourage you to read them, and also to stay in touch for any future events. And many thanks again, and see you around. Bye.